Hello, I'm Professor Vicky Vass and I'm the CEO of Alzheimer's Research Australia, and I'm delighted to be able to be having a lovely chat but a very serious conversation with Professor Colin Masters. Colin is one of the most eminent researchers within this area.
My name is Colin Masters. I was born and bred in Perth. I have been working on Alzheimer's disease for many, many years, which started in Perth. And currently I work in Melbourne at the University of Melbourne and the Florey Institute. And it's always a pleasure to come back to Perth to visit my colleagues who work in the Alzheimer's Research Australia organisation, who are doing fantastic work. And I'm looking forward to having a chat with the new CEO of Alzheimer's Research Australia, Vicky Vass.
Professor Masters, it is a delight to have you here at ARA, Alzheimer's Research Australia. And I just wanted to have a bit of a chat with you and for us to be able to hear some of your insight and wisdom around Alzheimer's disease. Dementia has been described as one of the worst diseases known to man. And as one of the most eminent researchers in this area, what we would like to hear from you is, what are the most promising advancements in research within the area?
When I started work on Alzheimer's disease here in Perth in the 1970s, we knew virtually nothing about the reason why people develop Alzheimer's disease. So I've worked on this for a good many years. And over that period of time, we've come to understand it's a specific disease, and we've come to understand its causes, and now we know how to diagnose it during life and how to treat it. That's a pretty remarkable statement. It all has to be qualified, but this is a tremendous change in the way that we started work nearly 50 years ago on this.
And 50 years is 50 years of amazing research. Could you just share what the key research findings have been in that time?
Well, it all began when we first uncovered the biochemical molecular nature of the process that goes wrong in your brain as you're developing Alzheimer's disease. That's the build-up of this amyloid peptide in the brain, which we call A-beta for short. It's a very small peptide, but it took us 5-10 years to figure out what it is, where it came from. But once we knew what we were looking for, then it was just the process of developing technologies to be able to measure it during life and to look for changes before the onset of disease. And we have done that. And we've done that simply by using the latest technologies around imaging the brain, using molecular PET imaging, and also developing fluid-based biomarkers. That means measuring this material in your blood and cerebrospinal fluid.
And of course, a lot of that research happens here in Perth.
That's very much what happens here in Perth right at the moment. But you have to also understand that this has been a global effort, and it's not just me doing this work. When I started, there was only a handful of people around the world, a handful of people working in this area. Today there's something like 10,000 people all around the world, all working on the same problem.
Which is phenomenal, and particularly given that it is such an issue. And am I correct in believing that Alzheimer's is the #1 killer of women in Australia?
Correct. So women over the age of 65 in Australia, not the US, but in Australia, it's the leading cause of death. Now, it's not just Alzheimer's, it's dementia overall. So dementia overall is a major burden on our society, and the men are catching up.
Do you want to expand on that a bit?
Well, the men typically die from heart disease, but we're getting on top of that, and now the dementias are creeping up in the male population as well. Soon, dementia will be the leading cause of death over the age of 65. And as you know, our population is increasing all the time.
And we have that ever-increasing ageing population.
Yeah, so we're getting healthier and healthier. And the prospects that I'm going to talk about now, I hope, of actually reversing and stopping Alzheimer's disease is simply going to extend our longevities by a major amount.
So do you want to share some of that with us?
Well, the latest results that we have on the new class of therapies directed at lowering the rate at which this amyloid peptide accumulates in your brain is translating into slowing of cognitive decline in people who are cognitively impaired. But the research that we're doing at the moment is suggesting that if we go as early as possible before the onset of any cognitive impairment, we have a real chance of actually delaying or preventing onset completely. Now that would be a remarkable outcome.
But how do we know who is susceptible and who perhaps isn't?
Well, we have a number of risk factors, most of which are genetic. So we can just take a sample of your DNA and have a look and say you are at higher risk than this other person. So you, at a high risk, if it's you, will start to become very interested in your possibility of developing Alzheimer's disease from about the age of 40 to 50. And at that point, we'll be looking very carefully, or the primary care physicians and general practitioners will be being trained how to pick up these changes. And if you are carrying some of the higher genetic risk factors, you will probably start therapies before the onset of clinical cognitive impairment. Now that is in the future. We're at least 10 years away from that. But today, we are beginning to look at the rollout of this class of therapy in people with symptomatic Alzheimer's disease. And what we know there is the earlier you go, the better the result. And some of these people, if you go really early, are beginning to change the course. They're getting better, slowly but surely. So, it's a matter of continued trial, continued evaluation of the safety and efficacy of these new treatments is going to be required.
And does lifestyle play any part in this mix?
Environmental causes are being very actively researched here at this institution in Perth, particularly sleep and diet. They're the two major variables that have been looked at very intensely over the last 10 years because we now have the technologies to look at intervening in sleep and diet to see what effect it has on the rate at which Alzheimer's develop. That is still work in progress. We haven't got a clear-cut answer, but we have tantalizing evidence that some environmental factors may be deleterious and some may be protective as well.
If we think about not just being one thing, but a combination, so what role then would genetics plus lifestyle
This
play?
is the story of all chronic age conditions. Cancer is the best example. As we get older, we assemble a number of genetic mutations, some of which are the result of environmental exposures. Here in Australia, we're exposed to a lot of sunlight and we have a lot of cancer, which causes genetic damage because of the environment. Now, what of course we're looking for is that does something similar to that occur in the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's disease? Again, that's work in progress.
Thank you. If I can just share with you, your work with us as an organisation is extremely important to us. And that collaboration, I know, has been underway with Professor Ralph Martins for many, many years. Can you share with us how you perceive collaboration? You mentioned about it being global. Can you share with us what you see as opportunities to collaborate going into the future?
Sure. So academics must learn to collaborate. Otherwise, the days of the sole investigator developing major breakthroughs is finished. So collaboration is the name of the game, particularly not only between academics, but also with industry. Biotechnology and pharmaceutical industry has a big role to play in the work that we currently do. So Ralph and I have been working together since the early 1980s. We have had a very big project called the Australian Imaging Biomarker Lifestyle Study, which has disclosed the natural history of Alzheimer's disease. I'll say that again because the natural history is an old terminology, but it is the way that we've come to be able to diagnose Alzheimer's before the onset of clinical disease. This is entirely the work of the collaborative work between Ralph and our group in Melbourne, who have taken volunteers in Melbourne and Perth and studied them regularly, year after year, sometimes now for nearly 15 years. And we've measured so many things about these wonderful altruistic people who've donated their times to come and be guinea pigs in our work, but it's given us insight as to what happens as part of the normal aging process and what goes wrong to develop Alzheimer's disease.
And I think it's particularly important when you stress the longevity and how long research takes. Yeah. Is there anything that could be done in terms of funding that could perhaps support and perhaps help things along?
Well, this work is very expensive and it doesn't happen unless you have supporters. We have support coming from government funds, not only Australian government and state government, but also international governments through the National Institutes of Health, for example. We are heavily dependent upon commercial sources of income for running clinical trials. And we are very dependent also upon philanthropic support from donors in Australia, around the world, who appreciate the magnitude of the changes which we are about to witness because of the previous generations who have contributed to this work. You know, you think about it, if we succeed in preventing Alzheimer's disease, that is going to be a major accomplishment for humanity.
Can I just close then on what are the benefits? If someone is thinking, I would like to contribute, what is the benefit to an individual, a corporate, government? What's the benefit for them to contribute to Alzheimer's research?
Well, we started this conversation by talking about Alzheimer's disease is the worst journey thinkable about. It is a terrible illness. And if you can get rid of it or ameliorate it, it's a cause that's worth supporting. It's pretty black and white in my book.
Thank you, Professor Masters. delighted to be able to have a conversation with you and look forward to seeing the absolutely amazing results that are coming through.
Thank you for your time.